First of all, I think we have it all wrong, and we're never going to get it right until the carnivore community really grows, because all of the tests and everything are basically done using sugar eaters, glucose people, as the baseline.
Karen, how did you find carnivore?
Well, Dave, thanks for having me on and letting me share my story. I found carnivore a few times, actually. Um, my mom and I, back in, I don't know, 2004, maybe, we followed the Atkins diet, which the induction is not quite carnivore, but when you're getting down to 20 carbs, you're kind of looking at carnivore. And I was never a vegetable person. And mom and I did that for a while to lose weight, and dad joined in and he lost weight. And then if you fast forward to 2012, by this time my mom was, I think she was diabetic by that, diagnosed as diabetic. And we went to the Ancestral Health Symposium that was put on in Cambridge. And it was a great round of speakers. It was more like a low carb keto. And I think that almost everybody finds carnivore through keto, I think, these days. And I'm no different than that. And I think it's the best way to find carnivore from what I've learned, just from different YouTube channels. But when I got serious, I was really interested in keto, and I think I saw Jordan Peterson and Michaela Peterson, and that had to be a couple of years ago, maybe even 4 years ago. I'm not sure when their things were, but they it was a while ago, and I just thought, wow, weird. And then I remember seeing something about a woman who had been carnivore for like over 15 years. And I'm like, really? Because I'm not really a big steak eater. I like hamburgers. But I was listening and I was paying attention. And then um, my husband got sick on February 6th of 2022. And on 20, like the next day, he was diagnosed with stage 4 colorectal cancer, and he died 67 days later. And yeah, it was a surprise. He had never had any symptoms. Well, the doctors say, and I say, he didn't have any symptoms. But now, after diving down the rabbit hole of um, keto and carnivore really hardcore, at that time I had gotten the services of Miriam Kalamian, I think is her name, and she did a book called some sort of cancer keto diet for cancer. And I started to do a lot of investigation with Thomas Seyfried and for cancer. But since Tim only lived for 67 days, it was there wasn't really any time to get the keto diet in for him. And because he had stage 4 colorectal cancer, he had 2 colon surgeries, and then they decided to rest his colon by giving him a liquid diet. I begged them to make it a keto. I knew you could do liquid keto. And they said no, they didn't know what I was talking about. And they gave him, whatever it is, glucose, dextrose, whatever. I'm sure it just fed his cancer. And he, like I said, it was 67 days from February 6th to April 13th when he passed away. And I decided then to get really serious about being hardcore keto, because I didn't want that to happen to me. And right after that, my mom was diagnosed. She started to have involuntary movements, and she was diagnosed with hyperglycemic induced hemibilismus, meaning high blood sugar caused these involuntary movements. I don't think that that's really what it was. I don't think her blood sugar was all that high. I don't really trust the medical community, the mainstream medical situation here in the United States. And I just started to do a lot of research on YouTube, and I decided to go to Low Carb USA. And Low Carb USA is put on the Metabolic Health Symposium, I think. And I finally went after years of wanting to go. There was nothing stopping me. And it was in San Diego in 2023. And most of there were a lot of MDs. It's kind of a focus to get MDs hooked, bringing forward the low carb message, I guess. And the a lot of the MDs there were carnivores. And this was like the first time where it's like Dr. Chafee was there, Dr. Wortman, Jay Wortman from Canada was there. I don't know if you know him. Um, and Tony Hampton was there from Chicago. He's a former vegetarian for sure, maybe even a former vegan, and now carnivore. And he's actually from my area in the Chicagoland area. And so then it looked like, oh, it's safe, right? It's got to be safe. It's got to be mainstream. And what I have decided is I always wanted to do something in, I don't know, it maybe in social media or maybe write a book. And I was always hearing about you have to have a story. And I never had a story because my life was charmed. I led a wonderful, happy life. My parents loved my brother and me. We grew up, very happy and healthy, not wealthy money monetarily, but my father did well. He was in the Air Force, and he retired from the Air Force. Then he started to be a teacher. And so we had a really great upbringing, and we were very close. And I'm like, I went to law school. I had scholarships for college, and it's just like life was easy for me always until I got this story because my husband, whom I had been with since I was 18, so we were together for 41 years, and we had known each other even longer than that. And one time when we were in the hospital, he said, this hospital thing is my story. Your story will be next. And when he started to get, I don't know if he had hospital confusion. He did have confusion. I don't know if that's what was the cause of this, but he always said he was a humble vessel. And he took his cancer in stride. He was the happiest person on the block in his hospital wing. And I got to tell you, I think that this is his message as well as mine. When I say he didn't have any symptoms, if you look back, he always ate sugar. He always had Twizzlers. We went to the movie and he would have two refills of, a soda that's this big, and he would have sugar babies and popcorn. He suffered from gout. That was something he had recurring, was gout. And but other than that, he had a little belly. He was 6'3", so he had a lot of height that he could distribute weight on. But he didn't really have any regular complaints or anything. And the reason why he died in 67 days was because he did have a very rare and very aggressive form of cancer. And, just because of the way we are, there's just no way that Tim would have said, oh, I'm just going to not take chemo, not take radiation, and just try it through diet. That takes a kind of person that here, 60-year-olds in the United States just are not ready to jump off that high dive. So back to the Low Carb USA, I thought I would share this story and make my purpose and my goal to bring the world back to their ancestral eating. And I just kind of want to look at what happened from the 10,000 years ago to now as being just a blip, right? It's just a blip. It can be reversed. People can get the message out. We've got social media. As long as we're not censored, we can get the message out for as much as we can, get the momentum building. And that's pretty much my story on how I got to carnivore.
When did you actually start? Like, it was straight after that conference?
Well, let's put it this way. I tried, right? And it's not, so our channel, my friend Dr. Cami and I have a YouTube channel called Dr. Cami and Karen Go Keto. The goal was that was August of 2023. The goal was we were going to stick to going keto. And we kind of did that. And I always had really good markers as far as, when I had my blood done, with an annual physical. Most of my things were really good, except for maybe a little high triglyceride and a little overweight. What the doctor said, like the last time I was measured in 2024, it was, oh, you need to lose 10 or 15 pounds. And honestly, I don't need to lose 10 or 15 pounds. I needed to lose 40 pounds. 40 to 50 pounds would have been okay for me to lose. Well, maybe not 50, but 40 pounds easily. And I have old clothes back then. So really, December 1st of 2024 was my first real day of let's try this really hardcore keto, hardcore carnivore. Actually, maybe I tried it in April of 2024, but I experienced explosive diarrhea. And that was a surprise. That was a big surprise. And I guess I didn't do enough research. Like, oh, explosive diarrhea. Okay, you better be careful. But what that means is if you have a rumble in your stomach, that's as much time as you're going to get. You've got to get to a bathroom. So I experienced that. So then I brought vegetables. I brought potatoes and like because I like Mexican food. So I would bring potatoes and what else was some like jalapenos back into my diet. And I was eating chorizo, a lot of chorizo. I was eating a lot of chorizo and a lot of hamburger. And then I switched to steak because, like I said before, I was not a huge steak fan. So, come July, I started to really eat, July of 2024, I really started to eat a lot more steak. And now I'm really, and I've done OMAD before during my keto phases, and it works for me. And I'm pretty sure that I will go to a just a one meal a day. I'm not really sure how that's going to look, or maybe just a really tight, 2 or 4 hour window, right? Like I've been eating steak and eggs. I eat out for a lot of my meals. I'm working on not eating out because it's cheaper, but I get a lot of other things because my mom is now in a wheelchair. My brother and I stay at home and take care of her. And I'm trying to bring keto into her, or not keto, carnivore into her life, which is very difficult because she has dysphagia and has swallowing issues. And so she's really on a pureed liquid diet. So I had a little YouTube, or not I had a consult with Dr. Baker, and there's no like liquid carnivore, right? So I'm now playing and getting serious with like, let's try to get the organ meats into something. Maybe if it's even just yogurt, because she eats a lot of yogurt. And I hate the idea that she's got so much dairy, but that's just where it's going to have to be for her. She's 86 and we want to get her walking again and talking because she stopped talking when she stopped swallowing. And the swallowing's been about a year and 3 months now. So we really want to, get her back because she's 86. But other than that, her body is healthy otherwise. So
You started again December 1st and you've continued from there?
yes. So December 1st to now is pretty much carnivore. And I will tell you, I did not. So since I said my markers were pretty good, right? My biomarkers were good as far as my blood, my HbA1c, my glucose is good. All of those are good, and the weight is coming off just gradually and nicely, no discomfort, just like pants that I was not able to even zip or button the like 3 weeks ago are now getting a little baggy on me. It's and it's in a comfortable way. Unfortunately, I got a lot of clothes in my closet that I don't have to go buy new clothing. So that's one of the really good benefits. So there's actually another benefit from this that I experienced with the explosive diarrhea, which is crazy. But once it was over, and I knew, like I knew that bout was over, I felt so light, so energetic, and so a sense of well-being that was hard to explain. And that's another thing that I think for me, I didn't think I had brain fog ever. I knew people said, oh, brain fog, lifted. But I got to tell you, it's not that I had brain fog, but I have a much better sense of well-being now. I don't procrastinate anymore. I follow through. And here's a stupid little example. One day I threw a tissue into my wastebasket in my bedroom and I missed. And I was in bed and I was, falling asleep. And I would just go, oh, I'll get it in the morning. Nope. I rolled out of bed, picked it up, threw it in the garbage. And and it's just weird because that's the sort of thing, those are just, the day is just filled with little things like that just make life easier. And it can't be anything other than the diet because that's all I've changed.
How did you get over the explosive part? Was that just kind of stopping and going back on?
Well, yeah, I just added. potatoes back into my diet because my main meal is usually breakfast. So I was having a skillet, and I did watch Bella at the Steak and Butter Gang, and she said if you are having that issue, then maybe it's rendered fat, it's liquid fat that you're having. And so, and I would put like butter pats on top of my chorizo and my skillet, right? So it would be the chorizo, and then it would be some butter pats, and then it would be some cheese, and then it would be the eggs. And so then I took that out and I added back like a little bit of potatoes, and just thinking maybe a little bit of vegetable in there might do something for me. And I did that for probably each time I did it for a couple of weeks. And and then each time when I felt, okay, I've gone a long time, no bowel issues, so I'll just try it again. And I did it in April, and then I did it in July, and I had the issue again in July. So it's like, okay, you know what? We're going to do it a little. But I did the same exact routine. I still did the pats of butter, and so then I got rid of the chorizo, rid of the melted butter, and just stuck with the like a ribeye or New York strip and eggs and no potatoes and no jalapenos. It's so filling. And the other day was the first day. You know, I eat burgers. Obviously, I mentioned burgers, and I like burgers, but I don't really like ground beef, like to brown ground beef. But it's fast, it's cheap, right? It's not always doing a burger. The smoke alarm doesn't go off in the house. And the other day, because this is now since, I would say, since, for certainly since January, mid January, it's really been a lot of steaks. Sometimes it's two steaks a day. And I started to do the steaks, and I thought I'll try the ground beef. I browned it, but I didn't really brown it, right? I just got it cooked. Maybe there was a tiny bit of pink in there. I just let it sit in the pan. And normally I don't like to stand up and eat, but I'm just like, okay, well, I'll just eat this. I was getting some stuff ready for my mom, and I just ate it out of the pan. I think I ate three-quarters of a pound of ground beef and said, okay, I can do ground beef now too.
It's just got rid of the rendered fat. The like that's what's helped.
I think that was the answer because
Mm.
I haven't really had it since I started the whole round in December, on December 1st. I haven't ever had that issue come back. Yeah.
Oh, awesome. Yeah, because it can be a bit disconcerting for people when they first get started to have problems like that, right?
It is. And that's why I think that really going keto beforehand and knowing these little, tips, don't have that liquid fat. I think that but honestly, as a horrible situation as that is for the 1 hour or whatever that you experience it, or I experienced it, it it does not take away at all from wanting. Didn't make me say, oh, I want to stop this. It just made me say, let's see how I can make it work, and what do I need to adjust to make it work. Because I can tell you, based on all of the, watching your channel, watching all of these other really great channels on YouTube about it, there's so much information out there that I really, people can come in armed, they can do it easy, they can do it, I recommend. And I think I've seen a lot of people on your channel say, start. It really depends. Like my cohort, Dr. Cami, she's a binger. She needs to lose 100 pounds, and she's a medical doctor. And it's really hard for her to say, how could I have gotten to a point where I need to lose 100 pounds, right? That right there is kind of an obstacle to get over. But the first thing, work on getting rid of those white things out of your diet, right? The flour, the refined flours, the sugars, the potatoes. And everybody has their own poison. Like for me, my poison, I had two poisons, and that was chocolate malts, because I used to visit my mom when she was in the hospital with one of her strokes. Um, I would visit every day, and I would stop and get a chocolate malt afterwards. Well, come on, we all know what that is. That's just comfort food, right? Some sort of comfort whatever. And but it took me a while to give that up, right? Because that was a habit. Visit mom, have the malt. Well, then mom got out of the hospital, but every time I drove by the malt place, I'd still get a malt because it brought back feelings of, oh, I feel good and I'm not worried anymore. Um, but truly, a piece of steak gives me much less worry than chocolate malt. So it becomes a
Mm.
new kind of comfort food, maybe. Or, um, you know, I because I was interested in the ancestral health background back in 2012, following paleo with Mark Sisson. Um, I really think, first of all, I think we have it all wrong, and we're never going to get it right until the carnivore community really grows, because all of the tests and everything are basically done using sugar eaters, glucose people as the baseline. So like, I don't think we have high triglycerides. I don't think we have high LDL. We just have it compared to those people. Like, I think we're going to find out, what do they call them? Something high. What's
Lean mass hyperresponders.
right? I don't think that's a thing, right? I just think it's a thing because we're comparing it to the glucose people, right? So when we get
Yeah,
back,
so it's like we're looking at lifts like it's perhaps an aberration or something, but actually that's probably closer to the norm.
right, exactly. That's what we should all be shooting for, because we would be lean mass. Um, I also don't really think that when they say, uh, yeah, we're supposed to store glucose, when you don't use it as energy, you're supposed to store it as fat. Well, you're not supposed to, it just happens. And I think that that's the real thing, is like, yeah, if you didn't eat glucose, if you didn't eat anything that was sugar, then you wouldn't be storing that fat. And I don't think that our ancestors 100,000 years ago went and found a berry patch and said, "Oh yeah, I'm going to go eat all these berries, and I have to eat these 3 bushes just to store 1 ounce of fat. I don't care what everybody else is doing in the clan."
Yeah, when you actually step back and look at what we kind of are indoctrinated into thinking with all the different marketing messages and what we hear from doctors and so forth, it just doesn't really make sense. But we just we never question it until we get to this point, right?
Right. I think, and the people on your channel really point out, some of them have suffered so greatly, and so many of them were told, like my husband, you've got a terminal illness. Sorry, we can't do anything. And that's my hope. Is I'm hopeful that there will be more people that find carnivore, more colorectal cancers, more, whatever, will find it and say, oh, or say, hey, before, I don't want to get to that point, right? I've got gout. Let me start eating meat, because that's the one thing they say: you have gout, don't eat meat. And, of course, that's not accurate. It's just what the protocol is, I guess, standard of care. But I also think that there's a lot of messaging, because a lot of the message has really gotten lost. But there was always banting back in the, what was that, the 1700s. That was low carb. And I had asked you if you had heard of the book Strong Medicine. I sent an
Yeah,
email.
no.
You saw that. Okay. And that was written by a Dr. Blake Donaldson, in 1962. And he had people, and here's a funny thing. He talks about a woman who, and basically it sounded like, when he was writing it, he's like, oh my gosh, was 178 pounds. Like, that would be nothing today, right? But he there, and there's a lot of very sexist writing in this, because of the time that it was written, because he was like in his 70s when he wrote it. He was born in the 1890s. So he talks about the little woman and what she should be doing at home. But if you can get past that, his message, every single one of those people, he said, you need to go home, no sugar ever again, no flour ever again. You need to eat meat. He did not eat salt. He said meat and pepper and water. And that's what you need to do. And he put a lot of people, and that's what this book is about, a number of case studies that he did that for people. And, we have, in the 20s, when epilepsy was, especially childhood epilepsy was, before the drugs came out, they were doing the ketogenic diet. And it was a nutritional ketosis, and that's like 10% like 90%, 80 to 90% of fat in your diet. So, of course, that's not going to be very much vegetable at all, if any. Um, so, those stories are there. And then if you look at, Gary Taub's histories that he writes about and talks about how, and there's a lot of funny messages in the histories, right? Like people didn't want to use German scientists when they got here in the United States, right? Because of, the World War II, and it was just Germans were bad, so we're not going to we're not going to acknowledge their contribution to what they've done up until World War II. Then there are the messages that they had during World War II, and I'm in the United States, they rationed sugar. They had a whole ad campaign of why we shouldn't be eating sugar. Yeah. And so then when the war was over and they, they wanted people to eat sugar again, it's like, oh no, we were wrong. And, then of course we have all of the corruption with Harvard, especially. And, what's very interesting, I'm pretty sure you've pointed it out. Maybe Dr. Bart or Professor Bart Kay points it out often about the corrupt studies, or at least the dollars that are behind all of the studies. And of course, no one's going to make a fortune with getting people to change their diet, right? It's not going to be that many people, and there's certainly, you're going to have big pharma say, oh, I don't want to make I know I'm the CEO of a big pharmaceutical company, I just don't want to make $100 million this year. I don't know, when is too much, when is it enough? I mean, I can't believe you can't say no to that.
Yeah.
That's carnivore brain. I think the other one, meat brain or beef brain is what I like to call it, versus sugar brain. And sugar brain says more, 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 more. That void will never be filled, no matter what it is. Sugar,
Right.
what?
Well, it is. It is. It's a little bit like, yeah, no matter what happens, that void will never be filled. It's a little bit like, the person that's always putting off happiness or satisfaction in an effort to get things done. Like they always want to get the job done. They always want to progress a little bit more, and they never stop at any point to actually appreciate what they've done. So they're always trying to the next challenge, the next challenge, the next challenge, whether it's in business or work or whatever it is. And so they never stop to appreciate, well, this is where I am. And it's kind of like that addictive sugar brain. It's like you can never stop and just go look around you and appreciate life. It's always like, I need more. Give me more of this stuff.
Did you interview Georgia Ede?
I haven't yet. I'm trying to get her on, but I haven't yet.
She was one of the speakers at the last Low Carb USA, and her book. I don't know if you've seen her book, but it's fascinating. And she talks about the dopamine. Did you interview Anna Lemke, the
No, I
Dopamine
haven't.
Nation?
I
Dopamine
haven't.
Nation. So they both of them are talk about dopamine and the brain, but again, we're using everything as we're using that carbohydrate brain as the where brains are. I really think, I think a lot of this feeling that I get, like when they say that um, the depression goes away after 4 days. A lot of people will testify to that. And, I said, I didn't think I had brain fog, but I feel so fantastic now. I get so much done now. I don't have any thoughts of, well, first of all, I don't even have thoughts of food, but it's not just because of the mechanics of eating less and eating, just meat. There's a lot, it's because that's just kind of simple, but the part that makes it easy is just how you feel internally. And I think your dopamine really changes up. I'd love to see what dopamine hits look like on people who've been on carnivore, like for Kelly Hogan, who's been on it for 15, 16, 17 years.
It's very nice to get to the point, though, where you no longer have that thing drawing you towards the junk, right? Or that feeling during the day like, oh, I've got nothing to do. I'm going to go check what's in the fridge. It's that emotional connection just gets severed, right?
Yeah. And one of my connections that I had, this was my other, like what I call my kryptonite, was Diet Coke. And even though it's not, I mean, even though it's a diet, obviously there's a chemical in it. It can't be good for you, right? It just can't be. So I had the hardest time giving that up through keto. And it's weird because at one time during my life, I never drank it. But when Tim got into the hospital, I started to drink it again because it was like the only low carb thing you could get at the hospital. And I drank a lot of it. And I had to I just said, I want to give it up. And I gave it up. And it was a struggle for a while. But then when I started eating the steak, it was no longer a struggle. And I sort of stopped because usually I went to McDonald's to get it. And sometimes I would go to McDonald's just to get an iced tea. And I stopped doing that. So I hadn't been to McDonald's for a long time. And I was traveling the other day and I did need to stop and get, so I got a diet, I'm sorry, I got an iced tea. And I saw a drink when I was walking into the building. I saw like a hamburger and a drink. And I'm like, oh yeah, I used to come to McDonald's for my Diet Coke all the time. I can't even remember what that Diet Coke tasted like. And it's only been like 2 months.
Yeah, it's amazing how you can break. I mean, I think part of it's habit as well. Like it's or like you were saying about the chocolate malt. It's like it takes you back to like it gives you a comfortable feeling or it's a nice memory or something like that. So I think it's all those things together. But being carnivore, it helps us to break out of that addiction to it, and also it kind of clears our mind so that it's more easy to break the kind of habitual connection or that nice feeling connection that we've got to the stuff.
Yeah, I agree. And I think that nice feeling it is so long lasting. At least it is for me. Like it just goes through it. It's the whole day. I never had real sleep issues, but I always could fall asleep. As soon as my head hit the pillow, I would fall asleep. But I always got up after 4.5 hours to go to the bathroom. Now I sleep all the way through the night. To it, yeah. So I. What else can it be? It's really the only thing I've changed in my, or maybe it's a combination of eating the beef, having less stress or whatever you want to call it that I didn't recognize that I had in the first place. So maybe whatever anxious thought I might have had after 4.5 hours of sleep is now not there. And so now it's not in my brain. I know I'm not dreaming like I used to. I used to have crazy dreams, and now my dreams, I don't even remember them. I know I have them on occasion, but it's nothing that disturbs me. And I used to have like murder dreams and overwhelmed dreams and driving underwater dreams. So I think that a lot of that is just how your brain restructures when it starts to get the food. Because not only did we add all that crap over the last 100 years, no, I'm sorry, over the last 10,000 years, but we've taken away. Now, really, we've taken away only for the last 100 or 200 years, right? But, if you look at, when you look at, when they started to bring in agriculture, because that's how I know a lot of the paleo people look at it and say, oh, look, they didn't have dental, they had good teeth, Weston Price, good teeth and all these indigenous people. No thoughts of, eating sugar or eating candy. And even whatever they had was not going to be sweet like it is today, not 10,000 years ago. But, you know, people wonder and say they don't know how those pyramids got built. Well, I think it has to do with the fact that they just had to feed people a little bit of bread and they could just keep feeding them bread. They didn't have to feed them fish. They didn't have to feed them goat. They didn't have to feed them sheep. Sure, Cleopatra and, all of the head honchos probably had their meats and blood, probably drank a lot of blood from animals. But yeah, it was the the slaves that were eating the bread.
Right. Yeah. So, back on your story, you're still doing OMAD.
Um, Not quite. I'm sort of, it's one of those things that it's like, when am I going to jump off the high dive and into the water? Right. So I'm looking at it. I'm trying, I do believe that OMADs should be scheduled well, right? So that you should look at what your schedule looks like to see, to be able to say, oh, it's going to be easy. I'm a firm believer that it should be easy and not hard. And I've always experienced it as being easy. And so what happened is, when I was doing OMAD easily, it was when I was eating at 11:30 in the morning. And now my schedule is such that I'm up at 6:30 in the morning, which I've always been up, but now I eat, like I run a little errand. I have to go help out at my mother-in-law. So I go to her house, and then I just go to eat breakfast out afterwards. So I really have to give up my whole eating breakfast out, just push it and just realign my schedule. And it's not, nowadays I say, oh yeah, it's workable, it's doable. It's just, when am I actually going to put it into place? But I am going to put it into place because I have things coming up that I want to actually do extended fasting, like a 24-hour fast, well, more like a 30 or 36-hour fast. I've done 30. I've never been past 30.
So at the moment now, you're doing two meals, like.
2 meals, and or kind of even like OMAD plus a little snack after about 4 hours.
Right. And that holds you over. Like, have you had any feedback from anyone about this?
Well, the place where I eat breakfast, one of the women is trying carnivore, or her version of carnivore. It's not quite carnivore, but she's working on it, and I encourage her. And I talked to a woman today, one of the servers, and she was, yeah, I need to lose weight, but I can't give up my vegetables. And it's interesting how that conversation has to go. It's like, well, you actually can. Here's the thing. I didn't think I could give up my husband, but I did. He's gone, not in my life anymore. And you can do hard things if if there's a thing that's strong enough to want it, right? So she's young, not yet diabetic, but to me, I've got to work on messaging, because I would really like to say, try it. Just try giving up your vegetables. Why can't you give up? What's stopping you from giving up your vegetables? If you can lose 10 pounds easily, or if you can, have a child who does not. And one of the people I'd like to have do this is a child that she's cutting. She's a teenager, and she's doing cutting. I'm sure the carnivore would help. I'm hoping the carnivore will make my hair go back to its regular color.
As someone who's graying myself, I'm not sure that nearly 3 years in, I haven't had success in that.
Oh, but maybe it's 30. Maybe you need 30 years.
Maybe, yeah. So I think one of the things you said there, when you were talking about the lady that said she couldn't give up her vegetables, um, I think you said something that alludes to part of the problem in our society now. Is, like you said, she's not yet diabetic, and we've got to the point where it's almost inevitable for most people that they're going to get there sometime, or they're going to have some other chronic disease that's food driven, right? It's like, if we don't put the brakes on this at some point, what's it going to be like in 30, 40 years from now?
Oh, Dave, I think you're giving us way too much time. I think it's snowballing, right? I think it's going to, the dangers are increasing exponentially, because you're talking about looking at, what, in 1920, very few doctors had seen diabetes, and now you can say, hey, in 2020, very few doctors had seen 5-year-olds with diabetes. You know, that's nuts. That's nuts, when that for 100 years people knew, don't eat sugar. And I know so many people in this realm say, oh yeah, yeah, oh yeah, you could just you can eat as much sugar, you just have to give yourself more insulin. And I think, and then when you can't afford to give yourself insulin, what then, right? So I think that it's going to go both ways, hopefully, right? People will start crashing sooner, and hopefully that will lead to people, um, getting finding out when they're at the, it's the last straw, right? There's just nowhere else to turn anymore.
Yeah, you would hope that we see a bit of a turnaround, but yeah, it's like we're powering towards a brick wall in our car, and like we just unable to take our foot off the accelerator. It's awful.
I remember when I was in college, I remember distinctly seeing somebody walking down the streets in Chicago, and I had a drink in my hand, and one other person had a drink in their hand. But that was it, right? It wasn't, because this was prior to Starbucks, and people just didn't walk around with food on their desk or food in their hands as they walked on the city streets. And now, you have a phone in one hand and a drink in another. And I think that that's pretty much everybody walking down the street.
Yeah, it's become pretty bad, but yeah, we just got to keep kind of pushing back against the information that diets need to be balanced.
It cracks me up. Or the rainbow. Eat the
Yeah,
rainbow.
everything in moderation. Yeah, and the trouble is everything in moderation, but all the foods that we shouldn't actually be eating are very difficult to moderate.
Yeah, I don't know how far it's going to go, but I do want to start on our channel, or maybe even a different channel, where it is about not so much debunking, but really how is our language does not help. The language that we use to talk about things is not helpful in having people get the health results that they want. And those two that you pointed out, especially the balanced diet. Why? How can a meatless Monday be balanced if there's no meat in it?
Good point. Yeah. So on that point, Karen, how can people find you? How can they find your YouTube channel and any other way they can get in contact online?
Well, so Dr. Cami and Karen Go Keto is our YouTube channel, and it is Cami is Cammy, and Go Keto, and I want to figure out how to cross it out and put carnivore on there, but like I said, we don't edit. So
No worries. I'll include a link to your channel in the show notes. Karen, thank you so much for coming on and sharing your story. I really appreciate your time.
thank you, Dave. Thanks for getting the word out.